After that, the game just went to back to the board screen. It was all I could do was to not burst out screaming, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold a controller. I knew the game was going to test me if I kept playing, but I had no idea it would go this far, or that even it was capable of doing something what it just did. I could feel my brain going haywire as I asked myself, did the game just read my mind? That didn't seem possible, but whatever explanation was there? It was then I could no longer deny what now it seems obvious now. The game is alive, and not only that, it could also establish some kind of mental connection with the player. And yet, I couldn't just convince myself to stop playing. I don't know if it was the game messing with my mind or my stubborn curiosity, but even within the previous revolution, I really wanted to see this go through the end, even more than I did before I beat Dementia. Terrifying as it may be, even dangerous, I knew that if I quit playing, I would never be able to stop thinking about it. If I tried to restart the game, it might go back to being normal again. How many people will ever get to witness something like this firsthand, let alone be able to take screenshots of the whole thing? As messed up as it was an experience of a lifetime. But yet, even so, I couldn't take any chances with my health. I had the TV remote right next to me, ready to turn off the TV in case if I felt that I was actually in danger. And if that didn't work, I would pull the plug out of the wall or just run out of the room. Surely it would be enough. Whatever the powers the game has, it seemed to be have confirmed of what it can show on TV. And whatever it was had a mental connection. Could do. The latter of it was that it worried me. I still didn't even know what I was dealing with, so I wasn't going to underestimate it. I took a break for a few minutes to calm my nerves and went back to my game. Speaking of TVs, there was this TV screen icon below where the white forest where I just left, and all because of that first animation was so bizarre, I figured I'd try another to see what happens. Although I expected the same animation, I actually got a total different one. Weird. The music on this one was Neptune board music. Fitting, I suppose, since it was Fishman and all. I can't help but wonder at this point of what these things are. There are more on the TV screen icon, so I figured that it must have been a unique animation of its own. I was going to make sure of what it was before I actually left Entropy. But even then it was time for another level. The gold brick icon was the closest thing, so I went to that and started up the gold labyrinth level. My health and power were refilled, not sure how or why, but I was glad not to be heading to the unknown nearly dead. I also noticed that Mothra sprite had shrunk down to half its original size. The music was now in a slow, obnoxious drum beat, with female voice kicking in for about a minute into it. Quite haunting. The gold labyrinth itself was normally, I'm not sure how this level would play out if I was using Godzilla or Anguirus, because flying seemed necessary just to get around this place. Another thing that caught my attention is that when you go left, your monster actually turns and faces your left. How stupidly obvious, but in the original game you were only supposed to move to the right, so when you tried to move left to your monster, end up walking or flying backwards. This level is apparently gigantic size, and because of every time I have thought I would have reached the end of it, or thought I was going to end up back where I started, I encountered something totally new. Things like larva blockades, new enemies, and statue faces. And I found one statue at the end of a wide and open eye stare. The night Melissa died, she had an expression on her face that looked exactly she was the whole time. Even when she got hit by a truck. She still had that same expression. I can't help but feeling that something was staring at me from behind the screen when I looked at it. I really didn't want to be reminded of that night anymore, so when I left the statue, almost as if I found out, I needed to exit the game, which, to be simple task, and I felt like this level would have stretched on for forever in all directions. I must have wandered around for the level at least 15 minutes before I finally saw something. It was a creature that it wasn't gold, seemingly not one of its kind in the level, lacking any kind of hover ability like any other creatures. It just walked back and forth on the platform. But it wasn't long after that I tried that when I found the flying machine swoop down and grabbed it, and then flew off with it. The machine apparently had not seen me, so I decided to follow it, to see where it was taking the creature. The machine had stopped in the room with the large cauldron-like object in the center. The machine hovered over to the cauldron and dropped the creature into it. The creature emerged from the hole in the cauldron side, now adorned with the same gold color as everything else. The machine flew off, and I'm not really sure what to make of it, but I'm glad I came upon it, because I found the next exit soon after. When I got back to the board, I realized that the bosses hadn't moved at all. A bit odd, but it didn't bother me. It made panning my route through the entropy easier. They were still able to have new icons to explore, the indigo cliffs and a black version of the labyrinth. Since then, there were only 3 black labyrinth icons that were surrounded by bosses. I played for the indigo cliffs first. It was a lot like the blue-green mountains. The level graphics had the same shredded look to it. There's also a recolor of the clouds and moon from the toxic waste dump. The music, if you could call it that, was merely a deep rumbling noise. One of the first things I have encountered were these multicolored creatures with big heads emerging from the small cave on the ground. They all made a synchronized shaking sound, and they all walked up into a group after emerging from the cave, ignoring me. Having no other way to go, I followed them on the other route. More and more emerged from the cave until the group had heard about hundreds of creatures. Eventually, the pathway ended in a cliff. I was shocked to see upon reaching that cliff, all the creatures began to jump off into the abyss. I've seen walk-off cliffs before, but I've never seen NPCs commit mass murder themselves like this. Like the unsettling way to start off a level. I continued on, flying over various strange animals like the ones shown here. But another group of multicolored bobbleheads was jumping up and down, only to be snatched up by a large bird, which I'm fairly certain these sprites' versions of the giant condor from Godzilla versus the sea monster. I defeated some of the condors in battle, but it bothered me that these bobbleheads seemed to be eager to die. If the game itself was alive, perhaps the creatures these levels are so alive, and so have happy unlives. If this behavior was any indication. But what provokes them to do such this in the back of my mind? I almost suspect that the glowing moon in the sky was the reason. At the end of the level, I saw yet another group of bobbleheads marching up to a large monster and being devoured. This was starting to disgust me, so acting on impulse, I fired off my eye beams on both the monster and the bobbleheads and destroyed the cave. The monster became angry and ran through the remaining bobbleheads to fight me. Although it lacked any ranged attacks, it was relentless, but it was no match for me. I was at home to stretch now up to my bosses, but my plan was to go through Batra first, then Magellan. After that, I would watch the last of the TV screen, play the Black Labyrinth before fighting Mega Godzilla, and lastly was going through the chase with the Hell Beast. and I was curious to see if it would be a new form again. But first things first, time to beat up Matt Batra. As I expected, he started off with his larvae form. The music was Varian's battle theme. Whenever the game puts as a new Godzilla kaiju was more than just one form, that form always shows up for the game that's otherwise inexplicable. It's rather startling consistency and accuracy with the new kaiju bosses. The fight starts off simple. Larvae Batra fought in a similar fashion as Megalon did, charging back and forth, occasionally firing off lightning from its horns. During the fight, I noticed that Mothra's combat capabilities have been altered in my favor. 1. The I-beams did 2 plus damage as much as they did originally. Now they were strong as Godzilla's punches, and the poison powder was seemingly improved. It also did this nice thing where it would actually hit an enemy as when you use it. In the original game, even though Mothra could fly, she was unable to fly over the opponent. You would get knocked back the same way if you ran straight into them, which is extremely annoying, but nothing more. I could fly in any direction around, but that was a big help because fighting a Mago Batra was much more like fighting a clone of Mothra. Although Batra was instinctively faster and stronger, no longer impeded by the slow-moving larva form of a Mago Batra, was fearsome opponent. Although it lacked the horn fighting, it was now a new and more powerful I-beam. Batra could change direction like it would, and so would the battle improve. A lot of flipping and flying around it. It was pretty damn fun, to be honest. So after defeating Batra, I was excited to see the Megalon would be there, but the first day I went through the Indigo Cliffs level and shot through the creatures for health power-ups. Sort about Megalon, this music was Gigan's theme. Makes sense since Gigan was his battle partner in Megalon's one, and so far the only, film appearance. He was a lot like Megara, but faster, and more weapons. He even started off by charging off his drills. I liked to fly back and forth around him, which seemed to really annoy him, but afterwards, he'd step back and then start spitting out grenades. Those were a pain, because they bounce and they hit the ground. Lastly, he started spamming and his lightning beam. It only went straight forward, so it was so easy to duck under, and then just shoot him with I-beams. Overall, I'll describe the film as strong, persistent, but dumb. I was now nearing the end of Entropy. I had just taken down Megalon and started up the last TV screen to get to see what I got this time. The result was unpleasant. The music for the gruesome scene was the password theme. I couldn't figure out why this animation was so sinister and violent comparison to the other two. The whole game seemed to be growing more malevolent. As I went to the finished Entropy, I began to feel drained, and it's kinda hard to describe, but I like it so hard suddenly it became tired when I wasn't before. Most likely it was because the intention from what had happened in the game was getting to me, but who knows. This was the last level type in Entropy, is what I could call the Shadow of Labyrinth. The scenery was recolored from the gold to black. The music was all in the evil emblems, similar to the Unforgiving Gold loop, but distinctively different. The music was my first sign of this level that was going to be distressing. I traveled through the maze for about a minute, and I noticed that there weren't any creatures hovering around. It was just an odd transition from the gold labyrinth, which overrun by the creatures, to his level and nothing at all. But then this might be a good thing. Maybe there were any other obstacles that I could get through within the level, full with ease. Then the screen went dark. Immediately I snapped out of my daze from a few seconds earlier. Everything seemed to have so darkened that the only thing I could see was Mothra's sprite. I couldn't tell where I was going, and I ended up frantically running into walls. I heard a noise and the sound of crowd running down the hallway. And along with the running, came the roars. Loud roaring sounds which would describe it as something like a rabid dog size of an elephant screaming with fury. And I could tell that whatever was making this noise, there were a lot of them. I knew there was something out there, but it wasn't until I saw the screen cap. And of what I got to see what my pursuers looked like. But at the time, I couldn't see where they were and where I was going. I was literally running blind. And this mob beasts eventually caught up with me. And all I could think was, no! As I ran for my life bar rapidly declining. The monsters had taken me down total my health. And then that save the light came back on and the attackers had disappeared. And so the challenge of this level was revealed. Find the exit before the lights go out and the pack of monsters maul you to death. I was in panic mode now, moving as fast as I could while trying to get through every path for a way out. As I played through the level, the lights went out and for a total of 3 times. The second time, I would have been dead meat if it hadn't been the wide-eyed statues. As I stayed close to it, the monsters seemed to all avoid me until the lights came back on. But the statue warded them away. Somehow it was safe as long as I stayed near the statue, but at the same time I had to leave to find the exit. The Shadow Labyrinth turned out to be much smaller than the Gold Labyrinth, as it only looked about 6 minutes to navigate to the end. But before the exit, there was now a row of halls leading straight down with no way out once you entered. You either got to the exit room before the monsters could reach you, or you died. Thankfully, I made it out. Only one more boss, Mega Godzilla. I started the battle, and then something unexpected. Not only did my life shot back up to 100% again, it seems to do that randomly, but instead of a replacement boss, I was fighting Godzilla. But Godzilla, a fan worth the salt figure, can diss out. Mega Godzilla started off like a fighting clone of Godzilla, but his disguise burned away only after 3 life bars. Usually, transformation occurred halfway through the point. At this point, it was fighting Mega Godzilla like in the normal game. It felt kinda nice to be one of the original game's enemies for a change. Although he wasn't exactly normal. He also had a rainbow beam that fired finger missiles and prevented me from going through the old trick of backing him into the corner, hitting him with I-beams in the spot where he can't hit me. It was always a cheap trick anyways. But after getting him halfway down his health, something weird started to happen. His sprite started to glitch in a much more the way as Jizora had way back in the first world. After a few seconds, the glitches began to form a new shape. And this game had created a not Mecha Godzilla. I had discovered this as a visual glitch, as somehow related to the game recreating things. The human face on gives it a very uncanny look. Like it was one of the stronger replacement monsters I had for the firepower. Picture this as a mouth beam, which I caught him in the middle of. Even though it was a bit stronger, it was slower than the original counterpart, and I couldn't jump around much. I won the fight by constantly staying out of his line of fire, while bombarding the machine with poison powder as I flew over it. One last thing, the Hellbeast chase. Oh boy, might as well just get this over with, I thought. The Anatropy end chase scene ended up being exactly where I was afraid it would be. A labyrinth level, all the other chases, although a difficult, extremely straightforward, you had to run right and not get touched. But this looked simply out of it. There was no telling how big this labyrinth would be, or where the exit was. And now not only did we have to constantly backtrack to find my way out, but I also had to avoid getting a one-hit killed by the red monster. For those first 30 seconds, it didn't show up, but I knew it would, so I started picking up the pace as I heard a loud flapping noise. There was the flying form. It flew with bat like wings, and it was fast and relentless as ever. For a reason already these started, would probably be in most nerve wracking of all end chases. As much as I had to keep my focus on the game and not taking screen caps. However, I did manage to take one of the red monster doing something I found interesting. I had managed to lose it by going for a different path than I apparently expected it. It was blocked from attacking me, gigantic walls of labyrinth, or so I thought. I tried crawling through the wall the second before opening its mouth to tearing apart with its long intestine jaws, but those brief milliseconds, the monster was held back to the key, me finding the exit. The path to the exit was long and complex, but from what I can remember, I went up and then went back towards the left. I'm still not sure why I choose that particular way. I'm just lucky hunch, I suppose. As I was sweating profusely, but my luck had saved me yet again, I hoped that I wouldn't just run out before I finished the game, where there were only 2 more worlds to go. The next was the pure ultimate world called Exodus.